When you get to fiscal year 4, you kind of see the amount of the interagency agreements have kind of ramped up a bit. And kind of one of the first interagency agreements in the Pawlenty administration was related to the Washington, D.C. office. In the 2003 session, when we were making budget cuts, one of the recommendations from the governor's office was to reduce the governor's office budget by $260,000 a year. And so this was taken by the legislature and enacted into law. There wasn't any specific rider abolishing the Washington, D.C. office, just the budget was reduced by that amount. And in testimony that we had afterwards, there were questions about, you know, why was the Washington, D.C. office reinstated? And the testimony from the governor's office at the time was that state agencies were interested in this office and were willing to put some funds forward because they felt value in the Washington, D.C. office. And then it wasn't until fiscal year 5 when the governor's office started to pay for some of the staffing costs out of the office. It started out at about 50% of the salaries were paid out for these policy staff, and in fiscal year 2008, it had changed to about 60%. Another change that came up until fiscal year 2008 when the lieutenant governor was the commissioner of DOT. A portion of her salary was coming out of the DOT budget, and once she was no longer commissioner, then her salary was totally supported by the general fund appropriations in the governor's office. One other item that I did note on there, if you look down, I've highlighted the sex offender policy coordinator. This was a position that was actually started in the governor's office in fiscal year 2005 and then was later moved out in fiscal year 2008 into the Department of Corrections. And I just kind of point this out to just kind of illustrate some of the difficulty in kind of tracking some of these positions and these dollars. I'm not making a comment on, you know, whether it's more appropriate for this position to be in the governor's office or in the Department of Corrections, but just to kind of show how some of these dollars are flowing. And then, as Mr. Mossman did note, last year in the state government budget bill, we did kind of more formalize the agreements by putting a rider into statute that kind of limited the amount of the agreements to $702,000 each year of the biennium and transferred the dollars into a special revenue account and then appropriated those dollars out to the governor's office. And to date, there's been about $675,000 that has been transferred into the governor's office. And about 330 of the anticipated transfers will be going for the Washington, D.C. office, and the remaining about 372 then would be available for staffing in the governor's office.